welcome to On the Payroll, my podcast about Salesforce, CRM, project delivery, consulting, leadership, anything and everything in between that catches my fancy as I'm talking to interesting guests. For today, I'm talking to Pragati, and it's so fun. She's a business analyst, pure business analyst who's done Salesforce projects. So we've got some really good conversations around requirements gathering and whether domain knowledge is important for business analysts in order to write strong requirements. I'm not going to tell you anymore. I hope you will listen in and enjoy our conversation. Thank you very much and have a great day. Good morning, Pragati. Hi, welcome to my podcast. It's called On the Payroll. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Fantastic. I'm really looking forward to this conversation because you are a business analyst, and it's something that it's one of the roles that I used to have, and I'm really passionate about it. So I can't wait to dig into the topics that we're going to talk about today. Sorry.
No, same here. I'm really excited. And obviously, business analysis and just the project space is a topic really close to my heart. And I just love chatting about it. So it's an awesome time. Thank you.
Okay, right. Looking at your profile, you've got very deep business analysis experience. And in one of your roles, you worked with Salesforce. Can you just walk us through your journey from university until present time?
Sure. So I actually kind of stumbled into business analysis. So my first role was actually with a company. It was like a contract role just to help out during tax season. So I actually have like my education is in biological sciences, life sciences. So it's nowhere near technology or anything around it. But I was kind of like, I wanted to make a career in technology, but I wasn't exactly sure where I was headed. So I got this role, just kind of help out with the tax season, more like an admin role. But within a few weeks of starting this position, I was offered a role with another department, the finance department, that was actually doing a special project. So that's sort of like the starting point of me being part of projects. And it was interesting because somebody in my team told me, you know what, the special projects are really boring, like you're going to be bored to death. And I was like, really? Like, do I want this? But anyway, I ended up taking it. I loved it. It was more like a data analyst role, but still had quite a bit of business analysis, which I didn't know at the time. But I learned over the years. And then I realized that's kind of like the field that I wanted to go into. So I actually went ahead and did like a master's certificate in business analysis just to learn all the skills and techniques and what it means to be a business analyst. And from there onwards, I've worked for different companies as a business analyst in compliance space. I have worked in retail. I've also worked in a quick service restaurant industry. So a lot of it has been really core business analysis. So just like worked in different business domains, sometimes as a full-time employee, sometimes as a consultant contractor, depending on where my interests were at the time. And most recently, I was working as a senior analyst for a cybersecurity company. So there, that was my first kind of introduction to the Salesforce ecosystem. So I was really scared when I started, but when I actually started working, I realized how much potential the system had and how much I loved actually learning about it. So right now I'm actually focusing on really kind of honing my knowledge in Salesforce, while also, focusing on my core skill set, which is that of a business analyst.
Excellent. I'm going to jump right down into the question that I really, that I'm always wondering about. Do you need domain knowledge to be a very good BA?
Domain knowledge definitely helps because that helps you understand the terminologies. A lot of times when you get into a new field, people are talking about things that, you kind of need to ground yourself in. But is it always required? I don't think so. Mainly because that's one of the good skills that we have as BAs. Like we can jump into things and kind of figure our way out. Like, if you throw a really vague project or a vague, requirement at us, like we're good at, working through it and trying to make sense of it. That's actually one of the things that I'm often asked in like my interviews or, when I talk to people, just because I've worked in a lot of different domains. And what I like to usually say is, and I really firmly believe this, is that because I don't have, or I have limited knowledge of this new field that I'm going into, I'm going to be able to ask better questions when I'm doing business analysis. And that is a really, really important skill set for a business analyst, to ask questions. We all know that. But if you feel like you know everything in a domain, or like, feel like, yeah, I kind of got this, you're going to have a lot of blind spots. Eventually you'll just be like, well, I know this. I don't need to check on this. You'll make a lot of assumptions, and that's like the worst territory you can go into as a BA. So I think it helps, yes. Maybe from like, if you're trying to transition to a new field or become a new business analyst, maybe somebody would really be interested in your business knowledge. But once you are a business analyst, or like, I don't think from the perspective of doing the actual analysis work, you absolutely require it. You can learn it.
Mm-hmm. I think it's actually a double-edged sword whether or not you have domain knowledge. Mm-hmm. My thinking is, so I've been in projects before where we've had BAs who were brand new to the product set that I've worked with. And now, especially in the small to medium-sized consulting partners for Salesforce and Microsoft, there is an expectation that the functional consultant pick up the business analysis part of the project.
Right.
Where I see a BA who doesn't have any domain knowledge, just like what you're saying, you ask really good questions. They're very expansive. And I wrote a post, I think a couple of days ago, about whether somebody who has a horse that doesn't take him from A to B very well. What does he need to solve the problem? Is it a faster horse, or is it a car, or something else? And I had somebody who commented on my post, well, maybe if you're the one with Uber, you might ask the question so that he says, well, actually, I need an Uber, which is a leading question. So instead of asking the right question to find out the pain point, you are asking different questions to lead the users to the direction you want him to take.
That's interesting, yeah.
So I can see that happening if you have domain knowledge. So
Agreed.
as I always say, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail to you. If you're a developer, everything needs to be coded. But you bring a very important point about the value of asking great questions. And I can see why you've got to where you've got to. So in your experience, how have you bridged the gap between yourself? So as a business analyst, you go in, there's a requirement there, between what you see as the current situation, current business problem, and translating that into a language or documentation or a way that the development team needs to understand in order to execute the plan, so to speak. How do you bridge that gap?
Sorry, so this is just about how the challenges with documenting the requirements?
It can be it's communication is what I'm trying to get to. So you've got So you've got the user with a particular issue. You're a business analyst. You may or may not know the product that is being used to work on or fix the issue. And you've got this team who's going to work on it.
Right.
And
Right.
how do you make that translation? Because that's what you are. You
Yes.
translate business requirements into technical requirements in a way.
Right. Yes. So when you, as BAs, even if, as you go through, if you go through training, or even if you don't and you're working, you develop those skills. One thing that's really important is for us to be solution agnostic, to a very, very large extent. So how that business requirement is going to be coded is something that you have to keep the business stakeholders away from, and also to a large extent yourself, because then you also start thinking about in terms of solutions from like the get-go, and that is a no-no. Like, you have to, like, the point of being the business analyst or being that person in the middle is to really prod and talk to the business to understand what they need and not what they want, as we always say. So digging into that is your core skill set. So I would say the bulk of your communication and negotiation skills actually lie with working with business stakeholders to really prod them in the right direction, and get what they want they get them to tell you what they want, basically. From there onwards to moving towards the developers, obviously there's a lot of analysis that goes in trying to understand and make sense of the requirements. And then to a very large extent, what I do is, like, if you look at the way I write requirements or user stories or acceptance criteria, they are really about what's needed. Like, so it's about, this is why the customer needs it, and this is what they need. In terms of the actual solution and design, how you're going to do it, that I leave to the developers, or like that's their main skill set, right? So I'll explain why we need it, and I'll explain what we need from a business side, and how you're going to implement that into the system. That is completely up to the technical teams. And if it has a UI element, then obviously, or some kind of design considerations that the customer really wants it a certain way, I would recommend it and say this is how the customer is envisioning it. But the details obviously lie with the execution team or the delivery team. Having said that, obviously, since we work in Agile, there's a lot of feedback loop. So you can take what the team is developing, show it to the stakeholder and say, well, this is where we're going. Is this the right path? Are you happy with it? And then we can, adjust and reiterate based on that. I mean, that's kind of like the whole point of doing the cycle. And so just being the person to make sure, did I get the right requirements? Are we building the right thing? And if we are we doing it though in a way that will satisfy the customer? And then we just kind of go into that loop pretty much. So I think that's sort of like the path that I normally take, with just really focusing on making sure that I've got the right business requirements, and just kind of going back to like that horse analogy, and for some reason I love horse and camel analogies. But it's really important that it's actually something that one of my instructors had said in one of the courses I was taking on business analysis. And he just said that the role of the BA is to make sure that if the business is asking for a horse, they get a horse and not a camel. So that's sort of like your place in the whole system, where you're just making sure that, we are building the right thing at the right time. So that's kind of like where I see the role of a BA, like, in terms of communicating those requirements back and forth.
Okay, thank you for that. That's really quite helpful. Can you give an idea of the size and scope of the projects that you are in? So where I'm coming from is kind of clear cut, because it's consulting. End user will say, we need all of this done by this time. This is the volume of scope, and I help with the help of my architect, will say, right, this looks like a team of 15 for so many days, maybe half onshore and half offshore. So that gives me an idea of complexity and size, which then in my head I can then apply the whether it's upfront heavy business analysis role for really complex stuff, these kind of things that we would do, or if it's smaller in size, then the BA portion becomes much more limited, and it's something that a consultant can pick up.
Okay.
So can you just give a rough idea of the kind of size or complexity of the projects that you run on a daily basis?
From my end, like I worked in consulting as well as, like in-house business analyst. So the kinds of projects that I do now obviously are different from what I did earlier in my career. So earlier it was more like, limited projects, limited scope. We are changing a feature, and maybe you have like one developer working with you, one developer and tester, and then you're just kind of added, you have like a constant stream of business requirements coming or client requirements coming, and you're just kind of hitting the system here and there. But as obviously I've progressed, it's become, my work has become more holistic. So like I'm looking at areas of changes, I'm looking at, major initiatives that the company is working on, and just kind of taking a more leadership role in terms of the projects that we are doing. So working really closely with like business, like with the business stakeholders, like the executives, and just kind of being the face of the project. So in those, we're talking about like a full team of, maybe 5 developers, 3 testers, things like that. And we're all focused on this one project for like, 3 to 6 months, depending on obviously the complexity. A lot of those, my recent projects have affected like, thousands of users, like those are big like data migration projects, or we are enabling, or we're making changes for to respond to tax laws for like, multiple countries at the same time. So those are sort of like the projects that I'm working on in like more recent times. Before that, when I was working more like in a boutique consulting role, it was because we had our own software that we were selling. So it was obviously making customizations for these customers who were actually, just to kind of align with their business processes. So those varied depending on, how much of a change the customer is requesting. Some of it was really custom work. So I've done like client onboarding, which lasted like 2 years. And some of them were more like, those were smaller companies, or, they were happy with like the software that they got and they really needed like small customizations. So those lasted maybe about a month, 2 months, something like
that. Let me tell you why I'm asking. And I think I went down one road and your answer has actually pulled me back.
Okay.
And let me tell you what I'm thinking. In the Salesforce consulting ecosystem, that part of the ecosystem, generally in the project teams, it's not usual to have a pure BA. Okay. There have been companies that work with the larger GSIs did have. So the projects are huge, whereby business change is a large component of the whole project. And I can see the value in that. You have pure BA, but also the other thing for Salesforce, as you know, it's not all development. As in when you want to implement something, you can customize the system so well with point and click.
Right.
Anybody without development background can pick up, learn to do process builders and workflows and inflows, that sort of thing. All you need is more logical thinking and problem solving skills, and you can do that. You don't need developers. So that I'm just clarifying the definitions of when I say developer. So in the Salesforce consulting space, you have the developers who do the actual Apex coding. You've got the consultant who generally does the BA piece of work and the configuration, doing the reports and the dashboards. Right. And for the larger projects, we have the BAs with the change management team that does a wider piece of work around transformation, for example.
Okay.
So that's one example where I see
Okay.
the BA in the Salesforce system.
Mhm.
The other one is on the other end, which they're quite small, but they still had a BA who also functioned as the Scrum Master and the PM, the front facing. So in the way that you described it, it sounds like what you do anyway. So the stakeholder management, conflict management, also a bit of the PM skills in
A little
terms
bit of that, thrown in there.
And what she did was that's what she did, and then she would write the requirements, and that gets handed over to the developers. So in that scenario, there weren't very many pure functional configurators. So in my head, so I've been asked, and I've had this conversation with various partners before as to the role of a pure BA, and that's the reason why I'm so vested in this conversation, is trying to understand. But I have a feeling that it's not the size that determines it or not. In my thinking, from what you're saying, because I know your background is a lot of bespoke custom system with software as a service, and I think in those environments you actually don't have the functional configurators.
You for bespoke software, no, that's sort of like, we don't normally, because it's not like the Salesforce system where, as you mentioned, that it's like a large part of it is configurable, and there's a lot that comes out of box, versus with those systems, if you're not happy as a customer with what we are offering you, there's a lot that goes into the customization. So then there is really like a solid need for a BA to really understand what the customer wants and why they want it before you can make that change.
Thank you. That really crystallized the classification in my head, and I'm able to understand it a lot better. Now, go on. Sorry.
I just wanted to comment on the Salesforce ecosystem for a BA. I think maybe I'll go back to this, when we talk more, I might bring up this point again, but I really think it's important, for a BA to kind of remove ourselves from the system that is going to be implementing the change. So whether you're working on smaller customizations, if you're the configurator, that's different, obviously, because you're taking the requirements and you're kind of implementing it right away. Then you need the knowledge of the system, definitely very important, very helpful, no doubt about it. But if you're working from a pure BA perspective, what's really key for me, what I've learned over the years, is that really focusing on making sure that we're building the right thing all the time. So whether you are doing it as just an incoming flow of changes, and even then it's important, just because you know that the system can do it, should it be done? And this is one quick change for you, just pull up this object and make that change and you're done with it. Who's using it? How are you using it? Who else is impacted? All of that other analysis still needs to be done. So I think that's important, that skill set, you shouldn't forget that. Doesn't matter if you're working on a digital transformation project or if you're working on just incoming flow of information, incoming flow of tickets.
I like that point. Let's just stay on that for a bit.
Sure. Yeah.
So again, with my background, we are a consultant. We go in and we help the customer. So if we look at that as a whole, so when you're talking about the understanding of what the customer wants, right? So if we're talking about a partnership between a client and a consulting partner, then that absolutely needs to be done. In the most ideal kind of projects that I've been on, those where the implementation has been absolutely spot on and really sweet, is where the client have their own BAs, because I think, and I always advocate this, that all businesses should actually do their own process improvement all the time. They should always be looking for ways to get better, to cut out the inefficiencies, and to save money, and just to be slicker in their operation. So that should be separate, whether or not you've got a transformation coming on, or whether
Yes.
you want to put CRM in or Salesforce, whatever that might be. So in my projects where there is this internal department, and there are many names for it, internal project, blah, 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 where you have an internal BA or PM, the partnership works so well because the BAs can tell us, and they know they're just so on top of things. We do this because of this reason.
Yes.
And we take that from a consulting point of view to say, okay, that is really, really useful to know. The thing is, you have bought Salesforce, and these are our limitations. We can take you 70% of what you want. The 30% would be quite expensive to implement. That's all. So the conversation becomes just so much deeper.
Right. No, I can totally see that because I've actually worked as that BA that you were mentioning, like that internal BA.
Side.
Yes.
Right.
So it's actually in my particular role, it was all in-house. Pretty much, we had our own development team, so we weren't contracting with an outside company. But having said that, that dynamic is still there because I mean, even if you work as a BA in any role, it's like, well, this is what the customer wants. This is why they want it. This is why they're doing it. But then the system kind of, limits certain things, right? That system could be Salesforce, could be another CRM, could be even your, bespoke, customized system where, yes, you can do a lot, but do you want to? Like, it's going to cost you money, right? So having that conversation is really important. So I think that is the role of the BA, like the way you defined it. It's like to know what's going on, to kind of keep on top of that, and then to kind of negotiate with the team that's implementing it. That could be a whole team of consultants and delivery teams, or that could just be an in-house development team. But that shaping, so you have shaped your requirements, now you're shaping the solution, so you kind of have to be on both sides of the equation and just make sure you're like on top of things on both sides.
Absolutely. So I see the role and activity is very key in making sure that the solution is the right one.
Exactly.
In projects, I've seen where that role is not there. And where, again, from a consulting partner point of view, we have a consultant go in to pick up that piece of work. I know that the solution hasn't been the optimum one for the client.
Right.
Specifically because we don't understand the business in a deep way that needs to be understood. So we go in, we have a certain number of days to ask questions that we can. And in those days, the key stakeholders need to be on hand, switched on, ready and willing and able to provide all the information that we ask for, and maybe those that we don't ask for as well.
Yes.
So bringing back to your point about being system agnostic.
Yeah.
When this situation arises, our consultants will ask quite narrow band of questions because we've got the Salesforce hat on.
Yeah.
I know I can do this using this way, so my questions will have that flavor.
Right.
And therefore, I'm not saying that the project that's delivered doesn't solve the business problem, but it could have been a lot better. In a way. So I can see it's so valuable, I think, for all businesses to have a BA role somewhere within the organization, be it sales operations or service or customer onboarding, whatever that might be.
I think nowadays, like, you've hit on a really key point. Like right now, like what I find is like, BAs are really associated with writing, user stories, acceptance criteria, just you doing the requirement work, which is important, which is our deliverable. But it's important to know how we got there, right? And as a BA, when you are focused on, learning the business, learning what kind of makes them run, understanding the business processes, improving certain processes, and, really kind of questioning why we do things a certain way and could we do it better. That role is really important. That role needs to exist, as you said, like, on the client side, because somebody needs to kind of gather that information and be that point of contact for you, even from the consulting perspective. And sometimes even as a consultant, when you go into a new company, like, you have a new project, like, it takes more than half the time to even figure out, are you talking to the right people or not, right? The BA, because they are obviously in that role and they are part of that company, they have a better sense of that is the person to go to. Even if they don't have the answer, they can direct you to the right person.
Yes.
They can tell you, well, these are really important, and there might also be a group that you may not think about talking to just because, nobody told you
Yes.
from an executive level. But like from a BA perspective, you're like, no, it's really important that you talk to these people because they are the ones doing this day in and day out.
Yes.
Those are the people we most often miss, like, the people with the least amount of power, but the most impact, because, especially as a consultant, you have limited time, so you're going to make the most of it, right? And so that's really important for that person to be there and to kind of direct you, almost to say, like, this is where you're heading, don't go there. It might be. So you need that person to work with. And it's their role, it's their expertise, and it's also like, just BAs, like at the end of the day, we always say, like, it's about providing value. Like, are you going to be providing value as part of this change? If yes, then you need a BA, like, to kind of work into the equation.
Absolutely, totally agree. Now, thank you for that. So we talked about. So let me just. We talked about the point between getting a requirement and user stories.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in a Salesforce consulting point of view, that is all squished into one during a discovery.
Yeah.
And I have found that to be hugely, like I said, if we don't have a BA on the client side, that is all on our shoulders. We do the best we can with the time that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not always the most optimum method of doing things.
Okay.
Now, in your role, when you were asked to do a user story from the requirements, can you walk us through your process and what happens between the 2 points?
So I think from like an initial requirement gathering meeting, I don't even like to call the first one requirement gathering because, everybody kind of puts their requirements hat on, be like, I'm giving you requirements. That's not what it's about. The first meeting is always about a conversation. It's understanding, where we are, what are we doing. It's very high level. So I try to stay away from calling my first meeting requirement gathering or requirement workshop or anything requirement like. So it's more about, can we do this? What are we doing? What are you thinking? It's just to kind of push and prod a little bit. Usually from the second meeting, obviously depending on the scope of the project, as I'm assuming like it's a major transformation project that we're heading into, something that will take a couple of months. So the next meeting is where we actually kind of corral and to, go back to certain things that were said in the last meeting, and just kind of bring those up and try to get a sense of, the really high level requirements, to say, okay, this is what we want. This is something that, we need. And this is sort of like something that we can live without for now and later. So kind of like the negotiations start at that point. You're not exactly prioritizing things at this point, but as a BA, you kind of know where you need to kind of start focusing your analysis on. So I usually try to have like at least like once a week, again, depending on the scope and size of the project, like once a week, I still want to like talk to the business stakeholders, understand what they are doing. In the first couple of meetings, I really just literally take it in to say, like a sponge, give me what you got, what were you thinking? Not what were you thinking? I mean, what are you thinking and how you want to go and things like that. So it's more about just gathering the information. At this point, I don't I try my best not to be like, oh, well, I know internally I'm going, that's going to be a lot of work, or that's going to cost you a lot.
Yeah.
But I try to refrain from saying that in like initial meetings, just because it kind of shuts the conversation down. And then it becomes more about, no, but I really want this. I don't care how much time it takes. And then the parties are not willing to meet in the middle and just say, well, like, it's almost like if you say no to somebody that we can't do it, like they want it even more. So that's the part that's why I don't want to bring up, like, resistance right then and there to say, oh, no, we're not going to do this. I know internally this is not happening, but still I try to stay away from that. And it actually helps, like, later on when I've had a chance to, and like, I don't want to be like upfront without even like really analyzing the requirement, come back and say, no, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to do that. I want to understand what you want. I want to go and analyze the system, the business processes, what's going to be impacted, who's going to be impacted. All of that work needs to be done before I call a requirement. And that will start to take the shape and form of a user story. And that's the part that I feel like we're focusing on less and less, or there's less recognition of the work that a BA does in that space, just because it's about the user stories now. So I gave you the requirements. We just talked about it. One meeting, in an hour, we covered like 20 things. I want all those 20 things on Jira. Yes, we could have it, but those are going to be placeholders, right? You're not going to get any value out of it. But the part that the BA plays is actually where you are looking at the requirement, breaking it down, understanding what's the impact, and then kind of building up to the solution.
So the analysis bit.
Exactly. It's the analysis bit. It's like, you are a business analyst. Like, I've actually said that to people, like, when they say, are we done with the user stories? I'm like, no, I'm doing analysis. I'm like, what do you have to do? I just gave you the requirements. I'm like, you could have just written those in Jira. Like, you didn't need me for that, right? So I'm doing what I'm here for, right? Which is the analysis bit. And also kind of, help the business prioritize requirements better, because I have some sense of what the solution is going to look like. Kind of help shape that conversation, because that's really important. And that's something that even we miss as BAs, where we just take what the business is giving us as like, from this is it. You have an opportunity to negotiate, and like, we definitely should take that opportunity. Actually, before we even get to the negotiation, really understanding what the priorities are. And the reason I say that is, the way I see it is like, how we have the Moscow system of prioritization. So you have your musts and shoulds and coulds and woulds. The way I kind of envision it in my head is, the musts are the gorillas, the shoulds are the elephants, the coulds are the red herring, and the woulds are sloths. So the reason for that is, like, gorillas, 800-pound gorilla, it can sit anywhere, right? So if it's a need, it's a must, you have to work on it. There's no question asked. So that is a gorilla in my head. Got to work on this, right?
Okay.
The shoulds are the elephants, which is the one that usually scares me the most, because it's the elephant in the room. This is where those requirements lie that the business really, really, really wants, but they want to appear flexible. So they kind of slide it down the scale and make it seem like it's not as needed as the gorillas, but sort of in the back of their mind, they kind of know this is a must. And it too, that it's a must. You're just kind of pretending until we get to a point where this is a big deal, and you're just going to shift things around. So this is the one, category of requirements that I babysit, because when that elephant becomes a gorilla, and usually it does at the worst time possible in your project, so you have to babysit that. You have to really make sure that what you have in the elephant category is really elephants, right? And then the next one so your coulds are like red herring, which usually are the smaller pieces that the delivery team will agree to, just to say, hey, we are flexible too, we're gonna let this go, and just to make like business happy. So those are red herrings, throw them off the scent. And then the last one, we always have those fourth priority would really love it, but I don't really care, and we're not going to talk about it next year. So those are just the slots which are not going to go anywhere. So they just sit there.
So this annual categorization, is this something that you came up with?
I kind of built up to it because I felt like the more and more, I worked on these things. Like this is kind of how I envision it. So when people talk about like prioritizations, like I started telling myself, this is an elephant in the room. And like, that's how kind of like those associations came up. And I was working on this project, which was a non-project because the goal was to make sure this didn't become a project to some extent. And I was asked to play the role to really, like, I was making the business case not to do something because there was something else coming down the pipeline which would solve this problem in a much better way. So basically it was to show that, it's worth the wait. So just wait it out for a little bit. We can do this so much better, so much easier, but we need time. Sort of that's so when I was building up to that case, like, I also had to highlight the requirements that we were being asked to deliver. So when I was literally like putting up the slides, and I was like, I could just put a gorilla up here and an elephant here and a red herring there. So to really communicate that, I didn't, but it was an executive presentation.
Oh.
But, still, like that was something that I really wanted to. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
That's how I just kind of started envisioning things in my head.
It's a good way of doing it because it's very visual. I'm not going to be able to forget it now. When I've got to practice that gorilla.
Yeah,
so thank you for that. Thank you. You know what? I just realized that time is going on and I'm having just so much fun. So I'm just going to pivot slightly. Sure. And one of the things that I like to do is towards the end of the podcast to learn a little bit more about you. Mm-hmm. And there's this thing called the You User Manual. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but basically, wouldn't it be great if everyone came with a little document that says, this is how you operate with me. I think we both have children and a young one. Wouldn't it be great if here you go, Mom. This is what makes me really annoyed. I do not like that broccoli you've been feeding me, or please more cuddles and that sort of thing. So here's some questions just to get to know you a little bit more. What are the kind of things about you that not very many people know? So some unfiltered truths, some raw truths about yourself that not many people know, that you'd like them to know maybe so that they can work better with you, maybe?
So from a work, like a professional perspective, I think it's, I think a lot of times, like my, I'm really passionate about just kind of work that I do. And as I mentioned earlier, I kind of stumbled into it. But over the years, as I've learned, I've grown really passionate about, what I do. And how we do things, and not just about being a good business analyst myself, but just kind of working on making my work as a business analyst better, and also kind of working with other people, like junior analysts or people who work with me, just kind of helping guide them or mentor them. And I really enjoy that. Like I really apart from just my work as a BA, just working with these younger people and just kind of helping them shape their career in business analysis, or how they how they would proceed in the world. So that makes me really happy. And I was doing that on and off, not obviously in a formal way, but I've just really realized now that that's a really big part of why I enjoy working in business analysis, because I also get to interact with these younger analysts and kind of help shape their thinking. And I want them to be excited about this field of work because I'm really excited about it. And to some extent, it kind of rolls back into me too, where if I see that, well, they get it and they're happy and with what they're doing, then it makes me happier and it makes me love my profession even more. So that's a part that I personally really enjoy, just kind of making sure that everybody's enjoying business analysis, whoever's entering it. Like if I can shape that conversation, then that's a big part of what makes me really happy in my role.
So at heart, you're a mentor and a coach.
I don't want to label myself as
but coaching young analysts and making sure that they're excited about things.
Like that's what I want to do. Except like, I guess the only thing is, if I call myself a mentor, I just feel like if what we do and if they think I'm a mentor or coach, then that's
exactly. So this is a label that other people give you, and not really something that.
Yes, exactly. Okay. That's why I said I would go with that label. But yes, that's one of my passions with the work that I do.
Okay. Just one more thing before we wrap up. I'd like to understand, what are the kind of values that you hold most important in yourself and in others?
I think the most important one for me is respect for yourself, for the other person you're speaking to, and just for your work. It applies to a lot of things, but I think for me, respect kind of is like it's like requirement. It's a baseline need for us to talk. I find, like, especially as BAs, we sometimes find ourselves in really hostile environments because, change is hard. Nobody likes change. We talk about it all the time. And sometimes when you're in that conversation, you kind of either face the brunt of the anger or depression or whatever feelings are going around that particular change you're implementing. So it's important for you to be, as a BA, you have to be you have to show empathy, and you have to understand what these people are coming from. But there is a level that you kind of have to maintain, that I need other people to maintain with me too. Is to say, I'm here to understand. You can vent all you want to me, and we can talk about what you want, where any issues, everything. I'm open to everything, but I need that level of just respect. Kind of respect for us, to me from you from me, just I know it seems odd bringing that up in like a professional environment, because you expect like a level of, say, like because we are like professionals, and you wouldn't expect that. And for the most part, it's been good, but I've run into certain situations where people were like in another mindset that doesn't quite sit well with the professional environment. So you kind of have to take yourself out of it and say, we can have this conversation, we can take this forward, but here's a line.
We need respect first. Yes, absolutely.
For the work that we are doing for us individually, and as the work that we're doing together. So it's not just like, well, you're not an assistant, I'm not an assistant, I'm not a scribe, I'm there to help you. Even as a junior analyst, like that's what I tell even like my junior analysts. If they start treating you like you're an assistant or you're a scribe, just to like, this is what I give you and just take it away. No, you have to push back, and you have to say, well, I appreciate that, you gave me the requirements, or we're talking about this, but, we need to work on this in a different way. So I think that's really important.
Thank you very much, Pragati. This has been such a fun conversation. I really enjoyed it. You have shared with us how you work in the various different organizations, including Salesforce and the other companies. We talked about user requirements so very much. We talked about requirements and user stories. And there's a difference, and you made that distinction quite clear. And process that goes between turning between turning requirements into user stories. There's a lot of analysis that needs to be done, and there is a very, very good argument for having a BA in all organizations if they want to improve, if they want to be better than they were yesterday. So I really, really appreciate your input today. It's been such a fun conversation.
Thank you so much. It was awesome. I loved it.
Thank you. All right. Take care. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.